The farm had been left behind, but a grandson returned and discovered something hidden there. Brandon Miller stepped carefully between the loose floorboards of the porch, feeling the weight of the debts that had brought him back to that place after 10 years. The law office in New York had gone bankrupt, and selling the family farm in Virginia was his only hope of starting over. That's when he heard footsteps coming from inside the house. Brandon froze. Who could be there in that abandoned place? "Is someone there?" he shouted, pushing the front door that creaked as it opened. A young brunette woman appeared in the kitchen, looking as surprised as he was. "Brandon?" she asked, dropping the cleaning cloth she was holding. "Who are you? How do you know my name?" He reacted, tense. "I'm Rachel, your cousin. Aunt Margaret's daughter, your father's sister. We never met in person, but Grandma Evelyn always talked about you." Brandon studied her face, trying to find some resemblance. There was something familiar about her brown eyes and the way she tilted her head. "What are you doing here? This house has been abandoned for years." "Not anymore," Rachel sighed. "I've been living here for 3 months. Grandma Evelyn asked me to take care of the place before she passed." "Grandma is alive?" Brandon felt his heart race. "No, Brandon. She passed 4 months ago. That's when I came here." Silence hung heavy between them. Brandon leaned against the wall, processing the information. His grandmother had passed without him knowing. Guilt hit him like a punch in the stomach. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Grandma Evelyn didn't want to. She said you were building your life in the big city and didn't need to carry the weight of things from here." "What things?" Brandon looked around the house, noticing it was cleaner than he expected. Rachel hesitated, nervously playing with her hair. There's something she wanted to protect, a family secret that couldn't leave here. "What kind of secret?" "I'm not sure. She just said that someone from the family needed to stand guard until you returned." Brandon climbed the creaking stairs to the second floor, recognizing every step from childhood. When he reached the door to his grandparents' room, he stopped abruptly. "Why is there a new padlock here?" Rachel had followed him up, stepping slowly. "Grandma Evelyn put it there before she passed. She said only you could open it when the time came. But I don't even have the key. She hid it somewhere. She said you would know where to look when it was necessary." Brandon went back down, feeling lost in his own childhood home. The walls were darker, the wallpaper peeling in some places, but Rachel had clearly tried to keep everything organized. "Rachel, I need to tell you something. I came here to sell the farm." She stopped walking and turned to him, her eyes wide. "Sell? But why?" "I owe a lot of money. The office went bankrupt and this property is all I have left." "Brandon, you can't sell now. Not before finding out what Grandma Evelyn wanted to protect." "Listen, I understand you've grown attached to the place, but it's not about me," Rachel interrupted, more upset than before. "There's a man who's already come here 3 times looking for you. He wants to buy the farm, but something about him doesn't seem right." "An interested buyer, that's good." "Brandon, you're not understanding. He doesn't want to see the house. He keeps asking about the barn, about your grandfather's office, about the old cabinets. It's like he's looking for something specific." Brandon felt a chill. Maybe there was more to this story than he imagined. "What does he look like? How old is he?" "Around 40-something. Tall, graying hair at the temples. He said his last name is Johnson. Michael Johnson." "Johnson?" Brandon repeated the name, trying to remember. "Johnson, the foreman. Grandpa always talked about Foreman Johnson, who worked here for decades." "So you remember him?" "Not personally. When I was a child, he had already been gone from here for some time, but Grandpa Robert was always telling stories about how they worked together." Rachel bit her lip, worried. "Brandon, Grandma Evelyn didn't trust the Johnson family. She always said there was something wrong with that partnership between your grandfather and the foreman." "What kind of something wrong?" "She never really explained. She just said your grandfather was too good, trusted people too much." Brandon walked to the living room window, watching the abandoned field stretching as far as the eye could see. He had so much to process. "How long can you stay here, Rachel?" "As long as needed. I have nowhere else to go anyway." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The next morning, Brandon woke up early in the guest room where he used to sleep as a child. The mattress was old, but Rachel had put clean sheets on it, and the room smelled of lavender. He went down to the kitchen and found his cousin making coffee on the wood stove. "Good morning. Do you always wake up this early?" "Farm habit," she smiled. "Want some coffee? I still have some groceries." "Thank you." "Rachel, I want to explore the house today. Maybe I'll find clues about Grandma's secret." "I can help you. I know every corner of this place now." They started with his grandfather's office, a small room at the back of the house. The shelves were full of dusty books and yellowed papers. "Where do we start?" Brandon looked at the amount of documents. "How about the desk? Grandma Evelyn always said your grandfather kept important papers in the bottom drawer." Brandon opened the drawer and found several folders organized by year. He began flipping through the documents: cattle sales receipts, lease agreements, business correspondence. "Look at this." Rachel pointed to a different folder. "These here are older." Brandon took the folder and saw that it contained documents from the 1980s and 1990s. Among them were papers mentioning an informal partnership between Robert Miller and Michael Johnson. "Informal partnership?" Brandon read aloud. "What does that mean?" "I don't know, but look here." Rachel pointed to another document. "There are several mentions of the barn project and joint investment." "Barn project?" Brandon murmured. "Maybe we should go there." The barn was about 200 yards from the main house. The wooden structure was in better condition than the house, apparently having been renovated more recently. "Have you been inside since you arrived?" Brandon asked. "A few times, mainly to look for tools, but I never searched for anything specific." They pushed the heavy barn doors open. Inside, besides the old farming equipment, there were several stacked boxes and a makeshift office in one corner. Brandon headed to the makeshift office while Rachel began opening the boxes. "Brandon, come see this." She had found a box full of documents and old photos. Among the papers, there were contracts signed by Robert Miller and Michael Johnson. "Look at the date on these contracts." Rachel showed a yellowed paper. 1985. "And look at this one. They formalized a partnership to raise cattle and plant soybeans." "But there's nothing wrong with that. It seems like a normal business." "There's more here." Rachel kept rummaging through the box. "Look at these photos." She showed several old photographs of Brandon's grandfather and a tall man in a hat working together. In the more recent photos, a dark-haired woman and a child also appeared. "That woman must be the foreman's wife," Brandon observed. "And that child must be the Michael Johnson who came here looking for you," Rachel finished. "Son of the original foreman, that makes sense." They kept searching through the boxes when Brandon found something that made him stop. "Rachel, come here. Look at this." It was a handwritten letter, dated 1995, addressed to Robert Miller. The signature read, "Sarah Johnson." Brandon read aloud, "Robert, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for our family. Michael grew up strong and smart, thanks to your generosity. I promise that one day we will repay all your kindness." "Sarah Johnson," Rachel repeated the name. "She must be the mother of the man who came here. But why did my grandfather help this family? Was it just because his father worked here?" "Maybe there was something more," Rachel suggested. Grandma Evelyn always hinted that the story was complicated. At that moment, they heard the sound of a car approaching. They left the barn and saw a blue Honda Civic stopping in front of the house. A tall man with graying hair at his temples got out of the car. He looked exactly as Rachel had described. "That must be Michael Johnson," Brandon murmured. "It's him," Rachel confirmed. The man walked toward them with confident steps. "You must be Brandon," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Michael Johnson. I've been talking with your cousin about buying the farm." Brandon shook his hand, studying his face. There was something familiar about his features. "Is it true you're interested in buying the property?" "Very interested. I can make a generous offer." "How generous?" $500,000 cash. Brandon almost choked. The amount was far above what he expected to get for the rundown property. "It's a tempting offer, but I need some time to think." Of course, but don't take too long. I have other investments waiting." Michael looked toward the barn, then at the house. "May I take a look around the property?" I want to see the condition of the structures. Sure, Brandon agreed, but something about the man's insistence bothered him. Michael walked straight to the barn, as if he knew exactly where he wanted to go. Brandon and Rachel followed him, exchanging worried glances. "This building is in good shape," Michael commented, knocking on the wooden wall. "My father always said your grandfather took pride in his buildings." "Your father worked here?" Brandon pretended not to know. "For many years. Michael Johnson Sr. He was the foreman of this farm." "And did you grow up around here?" Michael hesitated for a moment. "Not exactly. My family lived in town, but I came here often as a child." Brandon noticed the contradiction. If his father was the foreman, why did the family live in town? Foremen usually lived on the property. "Your father must have many stories about this farm," Brandon tested. "A few. He always said your grandfather was a fair man." "He was. Grandpa Robert helped a lot of people." "Yes, he certainly did," Michael said, but there was something odd in his tone of voice. They walked back to the house, and Michael examined every room with excessive attention. He touched the walls, opened cabinets, looked under furniture. "Are you looking for something specific?" Rachel asked directly. No, just checking the overall condition." But when they reached the second floor, and Michael saw the padlock on the grandparents' room, he stopped abruptly. "Why is this room locked?" "Some of Grandma's personal things," Brandon made up. "I haven't had the courage to go through them yet." "I understand," Michael said, but his eyes remained fixed on the door. After Michael left, Brandon turned to Rachel. "Did you notice how familiar he was with the house? He knew where every room was." "I did. And the way he looked at that locked door. It's like he knew there's something important in there. Brandon, I think we should look for the key, wherever Grandma Evelyn hid it." They spent the rest of the afternoon searching everywhere possible, behind paintings, inside books, under furniture, in kitchen jars. "Where did Grandma used to keep important things when you were a child?" Rachel asked. Brandon thought for a moment. "She had a little jewelry box that always sat on the dresser in the bedroom. But we already looked there." "What about the garden? Did she like gardening?" "She loved it. She had a rose bed that was her pride and joy." They went out to the backyard, where a few hardy rose bushes and a small tool shed still remained. "Let's check the shed," Rachel suggested. Among old pots and rusty tools, Brandon found a small metal box buried under some fertilizer bags. "I found something." Inside the box, wrapped in plastic, was a small key and a letter with his name. Brandon opened the letter with trembling hands and read, "My dear grandson, if you're reading this, it's time for you to learn the whole truth about our family. The key opens the chest in the bedroom closet. There you'll find letters your grandfather wrote but never had the courage to send. I ask forgiveness for carrying this secret for so long, but some secrets can only be revealed at the right time. With all my love, Grandma Evelyn." "What does it say?" Rachel asked, seeing Brandon's serious expression. He showed her the letter. "Letters Grandpa never sent," Rachel murmured. "Who would they be for?" "There's only one way to find out." They hurried upstairs to their grandparents' bedroom. Brandon unlocked the padlock with the key and pushed the door open. The room looked exactly as he remembered from childhood. The double bed with a patchwork quilt, the dresser with an oval mirror, the large dark wood wardrobe. Brandon opened the wardrobe doors and searched until he found a small chest at the back. Inside the chest were dozens of handwritten letters, all addressed to Sarah Johnson, but never sent. The dates showed they were written over more than 20 years. Brandon picked up the first letter and began reading aloud. "My dear Sarah, today marks 3 months since you left. I can't stop thinking about you and our son. Evelyn suspects something, but I don't have the courage to tell the truth. How can I explain that I fell in love with my foreman's wife?" Brandon stopped reading, his blood running cold. "Brandon," Rachel whispered. He picked up another letter, this one dated a few years later. "Sarah, I heard our boy is growing up strong and smart. I send money whenever I can, but I'm afraid Evelyn will find out. You were wise to decide to raise Michael away from here. He deserves a life without the weight of this secret." Brandon's hands trembled as he went through letter after letter. All told the same story. a forbidden love between his grandfather and Sarah Johnson, which resulted in the birth of a son. "Michael Johnson is my grandfather's son," Brandon said, his voice almost inaudible. "That means he's my uncle, my father's half-brother." Rachel sat on the bed, trying to process the information. That's why Grandma Evelyn suspected. It wasn't about the business partnership, it was because she knew about the affair. Brandon continued reading the letters. In one of them, from 1995, Robert wrote, "Sarah, I've made a decision. I'm going to change my will. Michael has a right to part of this property. He's my son, even if I can't acknowledge him publicly. When I'm gone, the truth should come out." "My God," Brandon murmured. "Grandpa left part of the farm to Michael. But where is this will?" Brandon searched the chest and found, at the bottom, a sealed envelope with "will" written by hand. Inside was a handwritten document signed by Robert Miller, dated 1998. "I, Robert Miller of sound mind, leave half of my rural property to my son Michael Johnson, born in 1976, the result of my union with Sarah Johnson. The other half goes to my grandson Brandon Miller, son of David Miller. It is my wish that both of you work together to keep the tradition of this land alive." Brandon let the paper fall to the ground. "Half the farm isn't mine. It's his." "Brandon. He has a legal right to this property, and I thought I was being generous by considering selling it to him." Rachel picked up the will from the floor and read it again. "But Brandon, look at this. Your grandfather wanted you to work together, not for one to push out the other. How can I work with him? I don't even know if I can trust him. He came here deceiving us, pretending to be just a potential buyer. Maybe he doesn't know how to handle the situation either. It must be hard to find out that your biological father never acknowledged you." Brandon walked to the window, looking out at the fields he thought were entirely his. "I need to talk to him, but first I need to understand this story better." They spent the rest of the afternoon reading all the letters. The story that emerged was complex and painful. Robert had fallen madly in love with Sarah, who was married to his foreman. When she became pregnant, they decided it would be best for her to move to the city and raise the boy away from the prying eyes of the rural area. Robert secretly supported the Johnson family for years, always making excuses to Evelyn about the extra expenses. Sarah never told the truth to her husband, who believed Michael was his son. "What a complicated situation," Rachel commented. "Imagine carrying that secret your whole life. And now I need to decide what to do with this information." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The next morning, Brandon woke up with a decision. He was going to find Michael and tell him he knew the truth. "Are you sure that's the best approach?" Rachel asked as they prepared breakfast. "I'm not sure about anything, but I can't pretend I don't know." "What if he denies it? What if he says the letters are fake? Then we'll have to do a DNA test." Brandon was finishing his coffee when he heard a car approaching. Through the window, he saw it was the same blue Honda Civic from yesterday. "He's back," Rachel warned. Michael knocked on the front door and Brandon went to answer. "Good morning, Brandon. I came to see if you've thought about my proposal." "Actually, yes, and I need to talk to you about something important." "Of course, what is it about?" Brandon took a deep breath. "Brandon, I know who you really are, Michael." The man's face completely changed. The friendly expression disappeared, replaced by a mix of surprise and alertness. "What are you talking about?" "You are my grandfather, Robert's son, my father's half-brother." Michael was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on Brandon. "How did you find out?" "He left letters. Many letters he never sent to your mother." "My mother," Michael whispered. "She never told me the truth." "Have a seat." Brandon pointed to the kitchen table. "Let's talk properly." Michael sat down, suddenly looking older and more tired. "When did your mother tell you the truth?" Brandon asked. 2 years ago, when she had cancer. In the hospital, she called me and said there was something I needed to know before she passed." "And how did you feel?" "Confused, angry. My whole life was a lie. The man I called Dad wasn't my biological father. And my real father never wanted to acknowledge me. Brandon felt a tightness in his chest, seeing the pain in the other man's eyes. Michael, my grandfather wanted to acknowledge you. He wrote a will leaving half the farm to you. A will? Michael lifted his head sharply. Want to see it? Brandon brought the document and placed it on the table. Michael read in silence, his hands trembling slightly. He was really going to leave me part of this? Not just going to. He did. The will is valid. But why was it never executed? Because nobody knew of its existence. He hid it along with the letters. Michael ran his hands through his hair, visibly emotional. Brandon, I grew up watching this farm from afar. My mother always brought me to walk along the road that passes in front. She said that one day I would understand why. And how did that make you feel? Envious. I saw you playing in the yard as a child. I saw your father working with your grandfather. It was as if there was a parallel life that should have been mine, but one I could never touch. Rachel, who had been quiet until then, approached the table. Michael, may I ask a question? Do you know anything about farming? I'm an agronomist. I graduated thinking that one day I could work on a rural property. So you have technical knowledge, Brandon observed. I do, and I have some ideas about how to modernize properties like this one. Brandon looked at the papers scattered on the table, then at the man in front of him. Michael, I'll be honest with you. I came here to sell the farm because I'm deep in debt. I know that. That's why I offered $500,000. But now I've discovered you have a legal right to half. Technically, you could go to court and claim your share. I could, Michael agreed, but that's not what I want. What do you want? I want to do what's written in the will, work together with you to run this property. Brandon was surprised by the answer. But I don't know anything about farming, I'm a lawyer. And I know about farming, but I don't have the capital to invest. Maybe we can complement each other. Rachel smiled, seeing a possibility the two men hadn't yet fully realized. What if you used the money from Brandon's debts to modernize the farm instead of selling? How do you mean? Brandon asked. Michael, you said you have a project to modernize rural properties. Brandon, you have the legal knowledge to formalize business deals. How about you form a real partnership? Michael got excited about the idea. I have a complete project to transform traditional farms into sustainable and profitable operations, organic farming, responsible animal raising, rural tourism. But that would require a lot of investment, Brandon considered. Not as much as you might think. And there are specific credit lines for sustainable agriculture. Brandon walked to the window, looking at the land that had belonged to his family for generations. Michael, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. Do you hate me for having had everything you didn't? Michael thought for a moment before answering. I used to, for a long time. But my mother always taught me that hatred only hurts the one who feels it. And now getting to know you, I see you've had your own struggles too. They weren't the same struggles you had. No, but they were struggles. And now we have the chance to build something together instead of fighting against each other. Brandon felt something stirring inside him. Perhaps it was a new possibility he had never considered. Rachel, would you stay here if we decided to run the farm? Of course. Someone needs to look after you too, she smiled. Michael, show me this project of yours. In the following days, Michael brought his studies and blueprints. He had developed a detailed plan to transform the farm into a modern and profitable operation, combining organic farming, free-range animal raising, and even a space for rural tourism. Rural tourism is growing a lot, he explained, showing charts and statistics. City families want to bring their children to see how a farm works. And how much would it cost to implement? Brandon asked, looking at the numbers. About $300,000 for the first phase. We can start small and expand as the business grows. 300,000, Brandon repeated. It's less than what I owe. But with the rural credit lines, we can finance most of it. You'd put in about 100,000 as your share, which I don't have. Yes, you do, Rachel interrupted. Remember that Michael offered 500,000 for the farm? You can make a deal where he invests that amount as a partner. Brandon and Michael exchanged glances. It would be like I'm buying my own inheritance, Michael observed. Or like you're investing in your own future, Brandon retorted. They spent a whole week discussing details, visiting banks, consulting experts. The more Brandon got to know Michael, the more he realized how they complemented each other. Michael had the technical knowledge and passion for the land that Brandon had lost. Brandon had the legal background and contacts that Michael needed to formalize the business. It was during one of these meetings at the bank that the first major obstacle arose. The bank manager, a middle-aged man named Richard, was reviewing the documents when he asked a question that made Brandon's blood run cold. "Is this handwritten will legally valid?" "What do you mean?" Brandon asked. "Handwritten wills need to follow certain formalities to be valid. They require witness signatures, notarization." Brandon took the will and examined it again. It only had Robert's signature, no witnesses. "What does this mean?" Michael asked, sensing the tension. "It means this will may have no legal value," Richard explained. "Without the proper formalities, the inheritance follows normal succession. Everything goes to the direct heirs." Brandon felt the world spinning. If the will wasn't valid, Michael had no legal right to anything. "But is there any way to validate it?" Rachel asked. "You'd need a more detailed analysis from an inheritance law specialist," Richard answered. They left the bank in silence. In the car, Michael was the first to speak. "Brandon, if the will isn't valid, you have no obligation to me." "Michael, no, let me speak. You discovered I'm your uncle, but that doesn't obligate you to share your inheritance with me." Brandon pulled the car over to the side of the road. "Michael, do you think I care about the legal validity of the will?" "What do you mean?" "My grandfather wanted to leave half the farm to you. He might not have followed the proper formalities, but his intention was clear. But legally I could keep everything. But morally I know what's right." Michael fell silent, his eyes moist. "You would do that? Share your inheritance with me even when you're not obligated?" "I've already decided. We'll make it a 50-50 partnership, regardless of what the law says." It was at that moment that Brandon realized he had made the most important decision of his life, not out of legal obligation, but because he was doing what he knew was right. "But before that," Brandon continued, "I want to know more about our family history. I want you to tell me about your childhood, about your mother." In the following days, Michael told his version of the story. He had grown up believing that Michael Johnson Sr. was his biological father. The family lived in a simple house in town, but they never went without. "My mother always received money from extra jobs that my father did at the farm," he shared. "Only later did I discover the money came from Robert." "And your father, the one who raised you, did he know the truth?" "I don't know. My mother never said. He always treated me like his real son." "Is he still alive?" "He passed away 5 years ago. Cancer." "And what did he think about the Miller farm?" "He spoke fondly of the time he worked here, said Robert was a fair boss, but that Evelyn never liked him much." "Why didn't Grandma like your father?" "He never could explain. He just said she looked at him in a strange way." Brandon began to understand the complexity of the situation. Evelyn had lived for years knowing her husband was having an extramarital affair with the foreman's wife. It must have been a silent torture. "Michael, was your mother happy?" "I think so. She loved my father, the man who raised me. They had a solid marriage. But sometimes I'd catch her looking out the window toward the farm with an expression I couldn't understand." "Nostalgia," Brandon suggested. "Maybe. Or regret." Rachel, who had been listening to these conversations, made an observation that touched Brandon deeply. "You both suffered because of this secret. Brandon grew up without knowing his uncle. Michael grew up without knowing his biological father, and all because of a situation neither of you created." "That's true," Brandon agreed. "We paid for the adult's mistake." "It wasn't a mistake," Michael said. "It was a complicated situation. My mother and your grandfather fell in love, but they were already committed to other people. They did what they thought was best at the time." "You're not angry with them?" "I was, but anger doesn't solve anything. And now we have a chance to make something positive out of this story." It was in this spirit that they decided to officially start the partnership. Brandon used his legal knowledge to formalize an agricultural company in both their names. Michael invested his 500,000 reais as startup capital. The first project would be to renovate the barn to receive visitors for agritourism. The second would be to modernize the irrigation system to start organic farming. But just when everything seemed to be falling into place, a new problem arose. It was a Tuesday morning when a black car stopped in front of the farm. Out stepped an elegant woman of about 60, accompanied by a man in a suit. "Can you tell me who is in charge of this property?" she asked as Brandon and Michael approached. "We are," Brandon replied. "Why?" "I am Patricia Miller, sister of David Miller, and this is my lawyer, Mr. Thompson." Brandon felt his blood run cold. Patricia was his aunt, his father's sister. They had never been close, but he knew she had always been interested in the family's finances. "Aunt Patricia, what a surprise. What brings you here?" "I heard you were making some changes to the property, forming a partnership." "That's true. This is my partner, Michael Johnson." Patricia looked at Michael with suspicion. "Johnson? Where have I heard that name before?" "It was the last name of the old foreman," Brandon explained. "Ah, yes. And what is his relation to our family?" Brandon hesitated. How to explain the complex situation? "It's a long story, Aunt." "I have time," she said, crossing her arms. Mr. Thompson stepped forward. "Mrs. Patricia has some concerns about the legitimacy of this partnership." "What kind of concerns?" Michael asked. "The property belongs entirely to Brandon by right of inheritance. Any division of this property requires the consent of the other family heirs." "What other heirs?" Brandon asked. "I have rights to this property as David's sister," Patricia declared, "and I won't allow a stranger to take advantage of our land." Brandon felt anger growing inside him. "Michael is not a stranger, and I can do whatever I want with my share of the inheritance." "Yes, you can, but you cannot transfer rights to the property without proper legal review." Mr. Thompson took some papers out of his briefcase. "We have here a formal objection to any property transfer. Until a full judicial assessment is completed, no legal modifications can be made." Brandon looked at the papers, recognizing the legal language he himself used professionally. Patricia was trying to block the partnership. "What is your real interest here, Aunt Patricia?" "To protect the family's assets. This farm is worth a lot of money, Brandon. It can't be squandered on fanciful projects." "Fanciful projects?" Michael spoke up. "You don't even know what it's about." "I know you showed up out of nowhere wanting to get your hands on our property," Patricia answered coldly. Brandon felt the situation was getting out of control. "Aunt Patricia, how about we talk calmly? Come on, let's go inside the house." In the living room, Brandon tried to explain the farm modernization project, but Patricia interrupted him several times. "Brandon, you're being naive. This man is taking advantage of your inexperience." "He's not taking advantage of anything. He's investing his own money." "Money from where? How does a foreman's son have 500,000 reais to invest?" The question hit Brandon like a slap. He had accepted Michael's investment without questioning the origin of the money. "Michael, may I ask how you got this capital?" Brandon asked, feeling embarrassed. "Inheritance from my mother. She had saved money her whole life." "Saved from where?" Patricia insisted. "From the money Robert used to send to support the family," Michael answered, losing his patience. There was a heavy silence in the room. "What do you mean?" Patricia asked. Brandon realized the time had come to tell the whole truth. "Aunt Patricia, Michael is Grandpa Robert's son." "What?" "He's Dad's half-brother. Grandpa Robert had a relationship with Sarah Johnson, and Michael was born from that relationship." Patricia turned pale. "That's a lie. My father would never do such a thing." "I have the letters to prove it," Brandon said, going to get the chest. He showed some of the letters to Patricia, who read them in silence, growing redder and redder. "This is outrageous. Even if it were true, it gives him no right to the property." "Yes, it does." Brandon showed the will. Grandpa left half the farm to him. Mr. Thompson examined the will and shook his head. "This document has no legal validity. It doesn't follow the required formalities." Legal validity doesn't matter, Brandon said. It's my grandfather's wish. Brandon, you're being manipulated, Patricia shouted. This man showed up with a fanciful story and you believed it. The story isn't fanciful. Michael stood up. I have documents, photos, letters. Anything can be forged. The argument was getting increasingly heated when Rachel entered the room. Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone at the door wanting to speak with you. At the door was a white-haired gentleman, about 70 years old, leaning on a cane. Good afternoon. I'm John Baker. I used to live nearby when I was younger. I heard the Miller family is having some problems. What kind of problems? Patricia asked, suspicious. About the young man Michael's paternity. Everyone fell silent. You know our story? Brandon asked. I do. I lived in this area for over 50 years. I saw a lot of things. What kind of things? Michael asked. I saw Robert Miller and Sarah Johnson meeting secretly at the old mill down the river. I saw her leaving the farm pregnant. I saw the boy growing up with Robert's face. Patricia was speechless. That proves nothing, Mr. Thompson spoke up. Yes, it does, John Baker countered, because I was friends with Michael Johnson Sr., the foreman, and he knew the boy wasn't his son. He knew? Michael asked, surprised. Yes, he knew. We talked about it several times, but he loved Sarah and decided to raise you as his own anyway. And why did he never say anything? Brandon asked. Because it wasn't my business, and because Robert was a good man in a difficult situation. Patricia sat down heavily in a chair. Even if all this is true, it doesn't change the fact that this will has no legal validity. There's one thing you don't know, John Baker continued. Robert made another will, a notarized document. Everyone turned to him. How do you know this? Mr. Thompson asked. Because I was one of the witnesses. Brandon felt his heart race. Where is this will? At Notary Wilson's office in town. Robert had it notarized 3 months before he passed. And what does this will say? Patricia asked, nervous. The same thing as this one, half the property for Brandon, half for Michael. On the condition that they work together. Patricia turned pale. This is impossible. Why has this will never surfaced? Because Robert asked for it to be opened only after Michael turned 40 and after Evelyn had passed. He didn't want to cause unnecessary suffering. Michael, how old are you? Brandon asked. 47. And Grandma Evelyn passed 4 months ago, Brandon finished. So now is the time to open the official will, John Baker said. Mr. Thompson frowned. We'll need to verify if this will truly exists and if it's valid. It exists, John Baker assured. And it's valid. I myself helped Robert draft it, following all legal requirements. Patricia stood up abruptly. Even if this will exists, I will contest it in court. This property has been in the Miller family for generations. And it still is, Brandon said calmly. Michael is a Miller too. He's a bastard. The silence that followed was so heavy it felt physical. Michael turned red, his hands clenched into fists. Patricia! Brandon shouted. Enough! It's the truth, she continued. An illegitimate son has no rights. Yes, he does, Brandon retorted, especially when the father acknowledges him in the will. Michael stood up and walked toward the door. Where are you going? Brandon asked. Away. I don't need to hear these things. Michael, no. Brandon, maybe it's for the best. Maybe I shouldn't have come back here. You have every right to be here. Brandon went after him. On the porch, Brandon held Michael's arm. Don't let her drive you out. This is your home too. Brandon, look at the trouble I've brought into your life. You were doing fine, had a simple plan to sell the farm and move on. I wasn't fine. I was running away, running from my responsibilities, running from my history. But now you have a family war because of me. It's not because of you. It's because there are greedy people who only think about money. Michael leaned on the porch railing, looking out at the fields. You know what hurts the most? It's not just Patricia. It's finding out that the man I called my father knew the truth and never told me. Maybe he thought he was protecting you. Or maybe he thought I didn't deserve to know the truth. Brandon stood beside him in silence for a few minutes. Michael, want to know what I think? What? I think everyone in this story tried to protect everyone else, and in the end they only caused more pain. How so? Grandpa Robert tried to protect Grandma Evelyn by not telling her about you. Your mother tried to protect you by not telling you about your biological father. The foreman tried to protect the family by pretending you were his son. And Grandma Evelyn tried to protect me by keeping the secret until after she passed. Michael thought about Brandon's words, and what was the result? Everyone suffered. Grandpa Robert lived with guilt. Grandma Evelyn lived with resentment. Your mother lived with a secret. The foreman lived with a lie. You lived without knowing your true origin, and I lost the chance to have an uncle. When you put it that way, we can't change the past, but we can decide how we handle the present. They went back inside the house where Patricia and Mr. Thompson were still discussing legal aspects with John Baker. It's decided, Brandon announced. We'll go to the notary's office tomorrow to verify this official will. And regardless of what we find there, Michael and I will run this farm together. Brandon, you're making a mistake, Patricia insisted. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. And what about your office debts? Mr. Thompson asked. How do you plan to pay them off without selling the property? With the modernization project. In 2 years, this farm will be generating enough income to pay off the debts and still turn a profit. And if the project fails, then at least we'll have tried to do something worthwhile instead of just running away from problems. Patricia gathered her things angrily. All right, Brandon, but I want you to know I'll be watching everything closely. Any irregularity, any sign that you're being deceived, and I will act. That's your right, Aunt Patricia. After Patricia and Mr. Thompson left, John Baker stayed to have coffee with them. Why did you decide to show up today? Rachel asked. Because the right time had come. Robert made me promise that I'd only speak when it was truly necessary. And you thought it was necessary today? When I saw that woman trying to push the boy out of his own inheritance, yes. John, can I call you John? Brandon asked. Did you know my grandfather well? Very well. We were friends for over 40 years. What was he really like? John smiled. Robert was a good man, but complicated. He loved deeply both Evelyn and Sarah, and he suffered because he couldn't choose between them. Did he really love Grandma Evelyn? He did, but in a different way. Evelyn was the respectable wife, the mother of his son. Sarah was the passion. And how did that affect him? Robert was constantly tormented. Sometimes he'd come talk to me, said he felt torn in half. Michael spoke up. And my mother, how did she handle the situation? Sarah was a strong woman. She knew she could never be with Robert officially, but she loved him anyway. When you were born, she made the most difficult decision of her life. What decision? To leave the farm so you could grow up away from all this conflict. But she wasn't happy away from here, Michael observed. She wasn't, but she thought she was doing right by you. Brandon absorbed every word, trying to understand the complexity of family relationships. John, do you think they made the right choices? They made the choices they were able to make at the time. It's not for us to judge. And now? Do you think we're making the right choice? John looked at Brandon and Michael sitting side by side. I think you're doing exactly what Robert dreamed of, uniting the family instead of dividing it. That night, Brandon and Michael stayed up talking late on the porch. Brandon, can I ask you a personal question? Sure. Why are you really willing to share the inheritance with me? Honestly. Brandon thought for a long moment. Because when I met you, for the first time in years, I felt like I was doing something right, something worthwhile. How so? My life in New York was empty. I worked just for money, didn't have real friends, didn't have purpose. When you showed up with this farm project, for the first time, I saw a possibility to build something meaningful. You're not doing this just out of pity for me. No, I'm doing it because I believe that together we can create something special here. And if it goes wrong, then at least we'll have tried, and we'll have done it together. Michael smiled. You know what impresses me most about you? What? You had a privileged life, but you didn't become a bad person because of it. You think I had a privileged life? Brandon, you had a father who acknowledged you, grandparents who loved you openly, quality education, opportunities. Of course it was privileged. Yeah, when you put it that way. But you don't act like someone who thinks they deserve all that. You act like someone who wants to earn it. Maybe because I finally understood that privilege brings responsibility. What kind of responsibility? The responsibility to use these advantages to do something good for other people too. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The next morning, they went to the notary's office in town. Notary Wilson was an elderly man who had known the family for decades. "Brandon Miller, how you've grown," he greeted. "Good morning, Mr. Wilson. I came to get information about my grandfather's will." "Ah, yes, Robert's will. I've been expecting you." "So it really exists?" Michael asked. "Yes, it does. Registered in 1998 with all the legal formalities. Robert left very specific instructions about when it should be opened." Mr. Wilson brought out a folder and placed the documents on the table. "Here it is. The will of Robert Miller, acknowledging Michael Johnson as his son and leaving half the farm property to him." Brandon read the official document, which was much more detailed than the handwritten one they had found. "There's an interesting clause here," Brandon observed. "It says that if one of the heirs tries to sell their share without the other's consent, their share automatically reverts to the other heir." "That means that—" Michael began. "It means we're forced partners," Brandon completed, smiling. "Grandpa Robert made sure we'd have to work together." "Your grandfather was a wise man," Mr. Wilson commented. "He said he wanted to ensure the property would keep uniting the family, not dividing it." "But why didn't he tell anyone about this when he was alive?" Brandon asked. "Because he knew it would cause Evelyn a lot of pain. He preferred the truth to come out after she was no longer here to suffer from it." They returned to the farm with the official documents. Now it was real. Michael had a legal right to half the property. "How do you feel?" Brandon asked during the trip. "Strange. All my life I thought I had no right to anything. Now I find out I have a right to more than I imagined." "And what do you want to do with it? Honor my father's memory and build something that would make him proud." "Our father," Brandon corrected. "Our father," Michael repeated, smiling. In the following days, they officially began to implement the project. Michael brought equipment to do soil analysis. Brandon organized all the paperwork for the credit lines. Rachel turned out to be a natural administrator, organizing schedules and controlling expenses. "You need to hire more people," she observed. "You two can't run a farm by yourselves." "You're right," Michael agreed. "I'll talk to some families here in the region. Many good people are unemployed because of the crisis in traditional farming." "And the agritourism?" Brandon asked. "When do we start with that part?" "As soon as we finish the barn renovation. I'd say about 3 months." They were in the middle of the renovations when Patricia showed up again, this time accompanied by more people. "Brandon, I brought my cousins from Richmond to see what you're doing here." Aunt Patricia, what a surprise. She had brought 2 middle-aged men whom Brandon hadn't seen in years, distant cousins who had never shown any interest in the farm. "We heard you're squandering the family's assets," one of them, named William, said bluntly. "I'm not squandering anything. I'm investing." "Investing in a partnership with a stranger," the other cousin, Kevin, added. "Michael is not a stranger. He's Grandpa Robert's son." "A bastard son," William retorted. Brandon felt his anger rising, but Michael put a hand on his shoulder. "Let it go, Brandon. It's not worth arguing." "Yes, it is," Brandon insisted. "No one is going to come to our house and disrespect you." "Our house?" Kevin laughed. "This isn't his house. It never was." "It's more his house than yours," Brandon retorted. "At least he's here working to improve the place." "Working to line his own pockets," Patricia said. "Line his own pockets. He invested $500,000 of his own money. If anyone's lining their pockets here, it's not him." The argument was getting increasingly heated when a city vehicle arrived. The city's agriculture secretary, a young man named Peter, stepped out of the car with some papers. "Good afternoon. I'm looking for those responsible for the Sustainable Agriculture Project submitted to the city." "That's us," Brandon and Michael introduced themselves. "I have good news. Your project has been approved for a municipal subsidy of $200,000. "Really?" Brandon couldn't believe it. Really? The mayor was very impressed with the proposal, especially the part about agritourism and local job creation. Patricia and the cousins were speechless. Additionally, Peter continued, the USDA Extension wants to use your project as a model for other properties in the region. A model for what? William asked. For the transition from traditional farming to sustainable agriculture. The project is truly innovative. After Peter left, Patricia and the cousins grew much quieter. 200,000 in subsidies, Kevin murmured. It's official recognition that the project is viable, Brandon explained. And if it works, it could revolutionize farming in the region, Michael added. Patricia looked at the two working together, and something in her expression changed. Brandon, may I speak with you privately? They moved away from the others. Look, nephew, perhaps I've been too harsh with you. Perhaps? All right, I was harsh, but I'm afraid of you getting hurt. Aunt Patricia, I know you're worried, but you need to trust me. It's hard to trust when I see you sharing the inheritance with someone we've never known. But now you know him. You've spent time with him. What do you think? Patricia sighed. He seems like a good young man, and he clearly knows what he's doing with farming. So perhaps I should give you two a chance. What does that mean? It means I won't contest the partnership anymore. But I want to monitor the results. That's fair. When they returned to the group, Patricia made an announcement. Michael, I want to apologize for what I said earlier. It was unfair. Michael looked surprised. Thank you, Mrs. Miller. And I want you to know that if you really are Robert's son, then you're welcome in the family. Thank you. That means a lot to me. William and Kevin still seemed skeptical, but at least they were no longer hostile. When do you estimate the project will start showing returns? William asked. Agritourism should start generating revenue in 6 months, Michael explained. Organic farming in a year, and free-range livestock in 2 years. What about operating costs? With the city subsidy and bank financing, we can cover all initial costs. By the 2nd year, operations should be self-sustaining. It's a solid plan, Kevin admitted. In the following months, the project began taking shape. The barn was transformed into a visitor space with a small farm store and a cafe overlooking the fields. Brandon discovered he had a knack for dealing with tourists, telling the farm's story and explaining agricultural processes. Michael proved to be a natural farmer, achieving impressive results with the first organic crops. Rachel officially became the manager, handling visitor reservations, product sales, and finances. Do you realize we've only been operating for 4 months and already have a full schedule for the next 2 months, she announced in a meeting. Really? Brandon was surprised. Really? And the supply store is selling more than we can produce. We're going to have to expand production, Michael observed. And hire more people, Brandon added. They had already hired 3 families from the region, the Thompsons to take care of the animals, the Davis family to help with agriculture, and the Browns to work in tourism. Everyone who worked in traditional farming wants to learn organic methods now, Brian Thompson commented. Folks are seeing that it works. And business in town has picked up, Amy Brown added. People come to visit the farm and then go have lunch in town, shop at the stores. Everybody's benefiting. That was exactly what Brandon liked most about the project. It didn't just benefit them, it benefited the whole community. One day, about 6 months after they started the partnership, Patricia showed up at the farm again. But this time she was alone and seemed different. Brandon, Michael, I need to talk to you. Of course, Aunt Patricia, is something wrong? Actually, yes, something good. She sat on the renovated porch, looking out at the green fields. You know, I always thought farming was a thing of the past, that the future was in the city in modern business. We know, Brandon confirmed. But seeing what you've done here, you've changed my mind. How so? Michael asked. This farm is more beautiful and productive than it's ever been, and it's creating more jobs than it ever has. It's the result of teamwork, Brandon said. It's the result of you having the courage to take a risk, and the wisdom to do things right. Patricia took an envelope out of her purse. I want to make you a proposal. What kind of proposal? Brandon asked, suspicious. I want to invest in the project, $50,000 to help with the expansion. Brandon and Michael looked at each other, surprised. Aunt Patricia, that's unexpected. Why? So far you've only shown me that you know what you're doing, and I want to be part of the family's success. But you didn't believe in the project, Michael reminded her. I didn't believe because I didn't understand. Now I understand, and I want to help. On what terms? Brandon asked, always cautious. No terms, it's an investment. If it makes a profit, great. If it doesn't, so be it. You've changed a lot, Aunt Patricia. You made me see that family isn't just about money. It's about building something together. They accepted Patricia's investment, and she started visiting the farm regularly, always bringing friends from the city to see the project. My niece is revolutionizing farming in Virginia, she'd say proud. Brandon loved seeing how she had changed from an opponent to a fierce defender of the project. But there were still challenges ahead. The biggest one came on a December morning when Michael got a call that left him worried. It was from the bank, he told Brandon. They want to review our financing. Why? We're up to date on all our payments. I don't know. They just said they want a meeting. At the meeting, manager Richard explained the situation. The bank is changing its agricultural credit policies. We're going to need additional collateral to keep the financing. What kind of collateral? Brandon asked. A co-signer with proven assets or additional real collateral? Isn't the farm itself enough as collateral? Michael asked. It is, but with the new rules we need something more. Brandon got worried. They didn't have anyone who could serve as a co-signer. How much time do we have to sort this out? He asked. 60 days. They returned to the farm discouraged. Now what? Rachel asked. I don't know, Brandon admitted. We don't have anyone with enough assets to be a co-signer. What if we can't? Michael asked. The bank could cancel the financing, and then we'd have to pay everything back at once. How much would that be? $250,000. They fell silent, processing the gravity of the situation. Is there anything we can do? Rachel asked. We could try another bank, Brandon suggested, or look for private investors. In 60 days? Michael doubted. It was a race against time. They had spent weeks visiting banks, talking to potential investors, trying to find a solution. That's when Patricia showed up with an unexpected proposal. I heard you're having trouble with the bank. How did you know? Brandon asked. Small town, news travels fast, and I know people at the bank. And? I can be your guarantor. Brandon was shocked. Aunt Patricia, that's a huge risk. If we can't pay, you lose assets. Brandon, you've shown me you know how to work, and the results are there for everyone to see. But it's a lot of money. It's an investment in a family that has finally learned to work together. Would you really do it? Michael asked. I would, with one condition. What? That you teach me this sustainable farming business. I want to learn. Brandon smiled. His aunt had really completely changed. Of course we'll teach you. With Patricia as guarantor, the bank problem was solved. But she didn't stop there. She started coming to the farm almost every day, learning about organic farming and helping with the administrative part. I never thought I'd enjoy getting my hands dirty so much, she commented one day, her hands soiled from planting. It's addictive, Michael said, seeing things grow, producing, and knowing we're doing something good for the environment too, Brandon added. Patricia became the biggest promoter of the project in town, constantly bringing new visitors and customers. My family is saving the region's agriculture, she told anyone who would listen. 1 year after starting the partnership, they took stock of the results. The numbers were impressive. The farm was generating 3 times more revenue than before, employing 15 people directly and another 10 indirectly. You know we're being studied by the state university, Rachel announced in a meeting. How so? Brandon asked. Researchers came here wanting to understand how we achieved these results so quickly. And what did you tell them? Michael asked. That the secret is teamwork and respecting the land. And the family united, Patricia added. Brandon looked around the table. Michael, Rachel, Patricia, Brian Thompson, Amy Brown, and others who had become part of the big family that the farm now was. You know what I like most about all this, he said. What? Everyone asked. That Grandpa Robert was right. The land really does bring the family together. It just took us a few decades to understand that. And now, Michael asked, what are the next plans? Expansion, Brandon answered without hesitation. There are several farms in the region wanting to learn our methods. We could create a cooperative, Patricia suggested. Or a training center, Rachel added. Both, Michael said. We're going to transform this entire region. That's how the United Farms project was born, an initiative to teach sustainable farming to other producers in the region. 6 months later, 12 farms were already participating in the project. The region had become a national reference in sustainable farming. You know, the mayor wants to create a special seal for our region's products? Peter, the agriculture secretary, announced during a visit. What kind of seal? Brandon asked. Sustainable Region of Virginia, to differentiate our products in the national market. That would be fantastic, Michael got excited. And there's more. The state government wants to replicate your model in other regions of the state. Brandon could hardly believe what he was hearing. The small project he had started as a way to save the family farm had become a regional movement. How does it feel to be pioneers of an agricultural revolution? Peter asked half-jokingly. Honored, Brandon replied, and with great responsibility. The responsibility to show that it's possible to prosper without destroying the environment, Michael added. And that a united family is stronger, Patricia chimed in. That evening, Brandon and Michael were sitting on the porch of the renovated house, watching the fields illuminated by the full moon. Do you think our father would be proud? Michael asked. I'm sure he would. We did exactly what he dreamed of. We united the family through the land. And we exceeded any expectations he might have had. You know what I value most about this journey of ours, Brandon said. What? That I found not just a partner, I found a brother. Half-brother, Michael corrected, smiling. No, brother, from the heart. They sat in silence for a few minutes, enjoying the tranquility of the country night. Brandon, can I confess something to you? Of course. When I first showed up here, it wasn't just to buy the farm. What do you mean? I wanted revenge, in a way. I wanted to take what I thought should have been mine all my life. Brandon looked at him, surprised. And what changed? You. Your generosity taught me that it's better to build together than to destroy alone. And you taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about choice. What do you mean? We chose to be family. Even with all the confusion, all the difficulty, we chose to stay together. And it was the best choice we ever made. I agree. 2 years after starting the partnership, they organized a big party to celebrate the project's results. The party brought together all the families working on the cooperative's farms, local authorities, university researchers, and many friends. Brandon gave an emotional speech. When I arrived here 2 years ago, I was running from my problems. I thought that by selling this land I could solve everything and start over somewhere else. He looked at Michael, who was standing beside him. But I discovered that you don't solve problems by running from them. You solve them by facing them, preferably with the help of family. And we discovered that family is much bigger than we imagined, Michael continued. It's not just those who share the same blood, it's those who choose to stand by your side and build something together. Patricia approached the microphone. As the person who resisted this project the most at the beginning, I want to say I was completely wrong. These two men not only saved the family farm, they saved an entire region. The audience applauded enthusiastically. But most importantly, Patricia continued, they taught me that it's never too late to change, to learn, to become a better person. John Baker, the neighbor who had revealed the existence of the official will, also spoke. Robert Miller would be very proud if he could see what you've built here. He always dreamed of seeing this land uniting families instead of dividing them. And his dream came true far beyond what he could have imagined, Brandon said. Because now it's not just 2 families united by this land, Michael added. It's dozens of families who have found here a dignified way to live and prosper. Rachel, who had become practically a sister to both of them, gave the final speech of the evening. When I first arrived here, I thought I was just taking care of an empty house until Brandon showed up. I never imagined I would be participating in building a dream. She looked at the entire gathered community. And the most beautiful part of all this is that it's still just the beginning. We have so much more to build, so much more to grow. And we will build it together, Brandon said. As a family, Michael concluded. The party lasted until the early morning hours, with music, dancing, and plenty of food produced right on the farm. There were over 200 people celebrating not just the commercial success, but especially the unity that had been built. The next morning, Brandon woke up early and went to the town cemetery where his grandparents were buried. Michael had asked to go along. They stood in silence before the graves for a few minutes. "Thank you, Grandpa Robert," Brandon said softly, "for having the courage to write that will, for dreaming of seeing us working together. And thank you for loving my mother," Michael added. "Even though you couldn't stay with her, you never abandoned her. Grandma Evelyn," Brandon addressed the other grave, "thank you for keeping the secret until the right time, and for forgiving Grandpa Robert." "Forgiveness is what keeps families together," Michael observed. "It's true, and we had to learn that the hard way." They returned to the farm for another day of work. But now it was a different kind of work. It wasn't just about producing and selling. It was about continuing to build a community based on cooperation and respect. "Brandon," Rachel called when they arrived, "there are some people from a television program here wanting to do a story about the project." "Really?" Brandon was surprised. "They want to tell the story of the farm's transformation and its impact on the region." "And do you want to participate?" the program's producer asked when she introduced herself. Brandon looked at Michael, who nodded in agreement. "Yes, we do. But with one condition." "What is it?" "That the story focuses not only on our success, but on the importance of family and sustainable farming for America." "Of course, that's exactly the message we want to share." The story aired 3 months later and had a national impact. Hundreds of people called wanting to visit the farm or learn the methods they had developed. "You know, the Department of Agriculture wants to use our project as a model for a national program," Peter informed them during a visit. "National?" Michael couldn't believe it. National. United Farms of America program to teach sustainable farming across the country. Brandon felt a mix of pride and responsibility. "It's a lot of responsibility," he said, "but it's also an opportunity to do something truly meaningful for America," Peter observed. "And for the environment," Michael added. They agreed to participate in the national program, but kept their focus on the farm and the local community. After all, that's where it all began, and that's where they wanted to keep living. 5 years after the partnership began, Brandon was married to a local veterinarian he had met during an agricultural fair. Michael had found love with a town teacher who often came to the farm with her students. Patricia had moved into a house on the property and become the official matriarch of the family. Rachel had married Brian Thompson, and they had 2 young children who ran through the fields just as Brandon had in his childhood. "You know, we're being visited by people from all over the world," Rachel mentioned at a family gathering. "How so?" Brandon asked. "Last week, some Japanese visitors came. The week before, Germans, and next month a delegation from South Africa is coming. Everyone wants to learn about sustainable farming," Michael explained, "and our project has become a global reference." "It's surreal," Brandon said. "Who would have thought this abandoned farm would become a global reference?" "It wasn't abandoned," Patricia corrected. "It was just forgotten. It was waiting for you two to meet so it could come back to life." "Like the family," Michael observed. "Exactly, like the family," Brandon agreed. One Sunday morning, Brandon was teaching his 3-year-old son how to feed the chickens when he received an unexpected call. "Brandon, this is Mr. Thompson, your Aunt Patricia's lawyer." "Hello, Mr. Thompson. Did something happen?" "Actually, yes. Something very interesting. We found more documents from your grandfather." "What kind of documents?" "A project he had developed in the 1990s to transform the region into a hub for sustainable agriculture." Brandon nearly dropped the phone. "What do you mean?" "Apparently, Robert was decades ahead of his time. He had already thought of everything you all did, but he wasn't able to implement it." "Where did you find these documents?" "At Patricia's house, in a trunk she had never opened. There are detailed blueprints, feasibility studies, everything." Brandon called Michael, and they went together to Patricia's house to see the documents. When they opened the trunk, they found dozens of blueprints and studies handwritten by Robert. "Look at this," Michael pointed to a drawing. "It's exactly the layout we created for the barn. And this one," Brandon showed another paper, "is the irrigation system we installed." "How did he know?" Patricia asked. "He didn't know," Brandon said, emotional. "He dreamed. And we made his dream come true." Among the papers was a final letter, addressed, "To my children Brandon and Michael. If you are reading this, it's because you managed to find each other and work together as I always dreamed. This land has the power to unite or divide families. I hope you have chosen unity. The projects I leave here are seeds of a better future. Plant these seeds with love and watch our family and our community flourish. With all my love and pride, Robert Miller." There were tears in everyone's eyes when Brandon finished reading. "He really planned everything," Michael murmured. "He didn't plan," Brandon corrected. "He dreamed, and we turned the dream into reality." "And now," Patricia asked, "what do we do with these projects?" Brandon and Michael looked at each other and smiled. "We keep dreaming," they said at the same time. Robert's new projects included even more ambitious ideas: a research center for sustainable agriculture, a technical school for young people in the region, and even an international exchange program. "That's the next 20 years of work," Michael observed. "For the next generation," Brandon added, looking at the children playing in the backyard. "Our family will keep growing," Patricia said, proud. "And our land will keep uniting people," Rachel completed. 10 years after the two brothers met, the farm had become an internationally recognized teaching and research complex for sustainable agriculture. The region had been declared a World Agricultural Heritage by the World Food Council. Brandon and Michael, now mature and experienced men, continued working side by side, bringing to life one by one the dreams their father had left on paper. "Do you know what the most beautiful part of this whole story is?" Patricia asked at a family gathering. "What?" everyone wanted to know. "That it started with two men who met by chance and ended up being brothers by choice. And that they saved not just a farm, but a whole way of life," Rachel added. "And that they proved that a united family really can move mountains," Brian Thompson completed. Brandon looked around the table, seeing all the people who had become his family over the years. Michael, Rachel, Patricia, and dozens of others who chose to be part of that dream. "Do you know what I'm most thankful for in this whole story?" he said. "What?" Michael asked. "That when I arrived here thinking I could run away from my problems, I found a family that taught me to face them. And I'm thankful I discovered that having a brother is the best thing that can happen in a man's life," Michael returned. "Even if it's an annoying brother who wants to control everything," he joked. "And even if it's a stubborn brother who thinks he knows everything about farming," Brandon retorted, laughing. The whole table burst into laughter. "You two fighting like children," Patricia said, shaking her head. "Some things never change." "Thank goodness," Rachel commented. "It would be strange if you didn't fight anymore." "We don't fight," Brandon defended himself. "We have productive discussions." "Yeah, you can call it that," Michael laughed. That night, Brandon and Michael took their usual walk through the farm fields. It was a ritual they had maintained for years. Every evening after dinner, they would walk around the property talking about the plans for the next day. "Brandon, have you ever thought about what our lives would be like if you had sold the farm that first day?" "I think about it sometimes. I'd probably be in some city, working in an office, still in debt and unhappy. And I'd be living angry, thinking I was robbed of an inheritance I never knew. It's a good thing things happened the way they did. It's a good thing Grandpa Robert wrote that will, and that Grandma Evelyn kept the secret until the right time, and that Rachel was here taking care of the house, and that Patricia changed her mind, and that we found John Baker." They laughed, realizing how many coincidences had to happen for them to get to where they were. "Actually," Brandon said, "I don't think they were coincidences." "What do you mean?" "I think it was destiny. We were meant to find each other and build all this together." "You believe in destiny?" "Now I do. When I see everything we've built, everything we've achieved. It can't have been just luck. Or maybe it was love, Michael suggested. Love. The love that Grandpa Robert had for this land, for this family. Even after he left, that love kept working, bringing us together. Brandon thought about his brother's words. You know what? I think you're right. Love doesn't end when people leave. It stays here in the land, in the memories, in the lessons they left. And it will pass to our children too. And to our children's children. They stopped on a small hill from where they could see the entire property lit up by the lights of the houses and barns. Brandon, if you could go back in time and change something in this story, would you? Brandon thought for a long moment. I would change just one thing. What? I wish Grandpa Robert and Grandma Evelyn could have seen what we built here. I wish they knew that all the suffering they went through was worth it. I think they know, Michael said softly. How? Because the result is here. The land they loved so much is now uniting not just our family, but hundreds of families. Their dream came true, far beyond what they could have imagined. That's true. They stayed a few more minutes contemplating the property in silence. Ready for another day of work tomorrow? Brandon asked. Always, Michael answered. After all, we still have many dreams to fulfill. And a family to keep growing. And a tradition to keep alive. They walked back to the house slowly, enjoying the tranquility of the country night. There was no hurry. They had their whole lives ahead of them to continue building that dream that had begun with a grandfather's love for his children and his land. On the porch of the house, Patricia was rocking in a rocking chair, knitting a little sweater for the grandson that Rachel was expecting. How was the walk? She asked. Good, Brandon answered. We were thinking about everything that has already happened and everything that is still to come. And did you reach any conclusion? That we are very lucky, Michael said. Lucky why? For having found each other, for having this land, for having this family. And for having many more years ahead to enjoy all this, Brandon added. Patricia smiled, continuing to knit. You know I love you both very much, right? We love you too, Aunt Patricia, Brandon said, giving her a kiss on the forehead. You saved our lives when you became our co-signer, Michael added. You're the ones who saved my life when you taught me it's never too late to start over. Rachel appeared on the porch with a tray of tea. Family meeting on the porch? She asked, smiling. Always, Brandon replied. This is our tradition, and it will be our children's tradition too, Michael said. And our children's children, Patricia finished. They stayed on the porch talking late into the night, as they did every evening, talking about plans for the next day, about dreams for the future, about memories of the past. This was how they ended every day on that farm that had been left behind, but that a grandson had found and turned into the heart of a new family, a family that was bound not just by blood, but most of all by love, by hard work, and by shared dreams. And there, on that porch, surrounded by the land their ancestors had loved and that they had learned to love too, Brandon and Michael knew they had found not just a material inheritance, but most importantly, an inheritance of values, the importance of family, the value of honest work, and the transformative power of love. The farm hadn't just been left behind. It had been left as a gift for the future, a gift they had learned to cherish and that they would pass on to the next generations. And so, under the starry sky of Virginia, another day came to a close on the farm that had become a symbol of unity, prosperity, and hope. A farm where the past, the present, and the future came together every day in the honest work of a family that had chosen to stay united. End of story. And you? What did you think of this story of family reunion and overcoming challenges? Could you feel the emotion in Brandon and Michael's journey? Comment below telling us which part moved you the most. And if you also have a family story to share, we'd love to hear it. Leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories.